Life doesn't forgive those who let their emotions take over, those who react without thinking, who get upset over anything, or who panic at the first sign of trouble, have already lost before the battle even begins. Have you noticed how the wisest people always seem calm, even in chaos? This isn't a coincidence. It's practice, mental discipline. True power isn't in shouting or acting on impulse, but in staying steady. Real strength isn't in feeling less, but in keeping your reason even amidst emotions. The Stoics knew this. It's not the events that disturb us, but how we view them, said Epictetus. In other words, what affects us isn't what happens, but how we interpret it. Until you learn to control your mind, you'll be a slave to your impulses. Anger, fear, and anxiety have one goal: to get you off track. But the real question is, who's in control? Your emotions or you? Stay steady, not because life demands it, but because reason should be your guide. Those who control themselves control everything around them. When you learn not to be a prisoner of your emotions, you discover a rare power. You see clearly when others are lost, act with strategy when others act impulsively, and stay steady when everyone else falls apart. What do you want to be? Someone who lives at the mercy of emotions, or someone who writes their own story with self-control? Comment "I control my emotions" and show that you're ready to master your mind. Like this post and share it with anyone who needs to hear it. Now, get ready to learn 12 Stoic lessons that will turn you into a master of your emotions. Lesson 1. Don't react, respond. Many people live being ruled by their impulses. They get upset by an insult, defend themselves when criticized, or get frustrated when things don't go as planned. This is a low way of living because the control of the mind is in the hands of circumstances. Those who react without thinking don't act, they're just carried along. A Stoic doesn't react, they respond. Reacting is an automatic act, like getting angry when contradicted, feeling fear when facing the unknown, or experiencing anxiety that leads to quick decisions. Responding, on the other hand, is a conscious choice. It's feeling the emotion without letting it control your actions. It's the moment between the stimulus and the reaction where wisdom comes in. Think of a commander on the battlefield. If he reacted to every move of the enemy, his army would fall apart. But if he evaluated before acting, he could turn the tide. Life is the same. The world will test you, people will provoke you, and unexpected situations will arise. The question is, will you react, or will you respond with wisdom? Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if something external hurts you, it's not the thing itself that hurts you, but your opinion of it. It's not what happens, but how you interpret it. If someone insults you and you react with anger, you're giving that person power. If you respond calmly, analyze before acting, you're in control. Being steady doesn't mean being indifferent. It means having mastery over yourself. The Stoic feels everything, but doesn't let anything dominate. He feels anger, but doesn't become angry. He feels fear, but doesn't become fearful. He feels frustration, but doesn't let it affect his decisions. That's true strength. That's real power. How can you put this into practice? When you feel a strong emotion, take a step back. Breathe before reacting. Avoid making a decision right away. Create a space between what happens and your reaction. The 3-second rule can change your life. Before acting, stop and count to 3. This brief pause can prevent an emotional explosion, and many times you'll realize it's not worth reacting. Another powerful exercise is to ask, will this matter in a year? What usually upsets us is insignificant in the long run. What someone said, a mistake made, a momentary frustration. All of this seems huge at the time, but fades with time. The Stoic looks beyond the present and acts according to what truly matters. Think of the great leaders in history. They weren't impulsive or out of control. They were calm, strategic. The great commander doesn't shout on the battlefield. The true master doesn't act in the heat of the moment. He observes, analyzes, then decides. There's one more important point. When you control your reactions, you also control others. Those who stay calm in chaos impress anyone. The one who expected an outburst of anger loses control. The manipulator who tried to make you act doesn't know what to do with your silence. The world belongs to those who master their emotions. Be steady, feel everything, but don't be controlled. Respond, don't react. The person who controls their mind controls their life. Lesson 2. The first thought is a reflex. The second is your choice. What comes to your mind when something unexpected happens? An unfair criticism, an unpleasant glance, a challenging word. The first thought isn't something you control. It arises automatically, like a reflex from your brain. But what about the next thought? That's your choice, and that's where the power lies. How many times have you regretted something you said or did in the heat of the moment? Anger takes over. Words come out without thinking, but then comes the regret. You realize you could have acted differently. You could have ignored it, but at that moment, it seemed impossible to control yourself. This happens because you followed your first impulse without thinking. The Stoics knew this over 2,000 years ago. They understood that we can't control the first impression that arises, but we are responsible for how we deal with it. Epictetus said, "If someone provokes you, know that the provocation doesn't come from the person, but from your interpretation of it." The world gives us triggers all the time, but how we process and react to them is our responsibility. Think of a spark. The first thought is like it. If you blow on it with emotion, it becomes a fire. But if you don't feed it, it goes out on its own. The problem isn't the spark, but what you do with it. When something annoys you, pay attention to your mind. There's a moment, a small gap between what happened and your reaction, where you can choose. Many people act on autopilot, controlled by their own impulses. But you can train your mind to notice the first thought, and instead of following it, choose a calmer and smarter second thought. This takes practice. At first your mind will be restless, but over time, you'll begin to notice clarity in place of confusion. You'll feel anger, but before reacting, you'll realize you can choose calm. You'll feel fear, but before shrinking back, you can choose courage. And the most interesting part, the second thought starts shaping the next ones. Your brain learns that you're no longer a slave to your impulses, but the master of your mind. Over time, what was once an automatic reaction transforms into a conscious response. Imagine a warrior in training. At first, he's slow and reacts without technique. Over time, his reflexes improve. He learns not to fall into traps and not to act impulsively. His mind becomes sharp and precise, always ready to act strategically. What about you? Will you keep allowing the first thought to control your actions? Or will you become the strategist of your own mind, choosing your responses with wisdom and awareness? The choice is always yours. The first thought is just a reflex. The second is the decision that shapes your future. Lesson 3. Calmness is a remarkable power. There's something almost supernatural about a person who remains calm while everyone around them is in a frenzy. They stay composed when emotions are running high. The modern world is full of reactive people who shout before they think, attack without understanding, and give in to emotions as if there were no choice. But those who master their calm have a power that few understand. Think of the great leaders in history. Do you think they made hasty decisions in the heat of the moment? No. They knew that true strength lies in keeping the mind steady, no matter what's happening around them. Marcus Aurelius faced immense challenges, but his reflections show someone who understood that external chaos has no power over the mind. Calmness is powerful because it disarms others. Those who try to provoke you expect a reaction. Those who try to destabilize you look for a weak point. But if you remain unshaken, if your response is always controlled and smart, you become unpredictable. You take away the pleasure of manipulation from others, becoming a barrier against any attack. But calmness isn't passivity. It doesn't mean accepting everything without resistance. It means choosing your battles, not wasting energy on things that don't deserve your attention. The wise person doesn't respond to insults because they know it changes nothing. The master doesn't need to shout to be heard because they understand that those who try to impose themselves have already lost their authority. The Stoic doesn't get upset by what they can't change because they know it's wasting their peace. Calmness needs to be trained. You need to understand that most of the things that steal our peace are small and temporary. A rude comment, an unpleasant glance, bad news. Think of the problems that upset you in the past. How many truly changed your life? When you realize this, you start observing your emotions without being swept away by them. You feel anger, but instead of reacting, you see yourself as a spectator. You feel anxiety, but you don't let it take over. You hear offensive words, but you understand they have no power over your mind. The most dangerous warrior isn't the one who shouts before battle, but the one who enters in silence, facing the enemy without fear. The most respected leader isn't the one who demands respect with their voice, but the one who, with their presence, conveys authority. True strength isn't in exploding with anger, but in maintaining control, even amidst the storm. How many times have you wasted time on unnecessary arguments or reacted impulsively, only to regret it later? Often, we give up our peace for small things and empty words. It's time to change that. Turn your calmness into your greatest weapon. In a world full of reactive people, be someone cool, strategic, and in control of yourself. When chaos comes, make your mind a fortress. And when someone tries to destabilize you, use your calmness as a strength no one expects. Calmness is a power that many don't know how to handle. Lesson 4. Don't seek justice in emotions. The biggest trap someone can fall into is thinking their emotions are perfect judges of reality. How many times have you been sure of something in the heat of the moment, only to realize later that you were wrong? Anger makes us feel wronged. Fear exaggerates dangers, and sadness distorts everything, making it seem like the world is falling apart. But your emotions are not the truth. They are temporary reactions. If you make decisions based on emotions, your life will be ruled by a chaotic inner court. No decision made this way will be wise because emotions are just signals from the body, not sources of truth. What matters is what you do with them. It's not what happens that causes you pain, but how you interpret it. True wisdom comes from questioning the first emotional reaction. How many times have you thought something was the end, only to later realize it wasn't that serious? Emotions exaggerate situations. True clarity comes when we take a step back, pause, and reflect. The Stoics knew this. They didn't trust emotions to judge, but used reason and observation to understand what was really happening. Feeling anger, fear, or sadness doesn't mean we're right. Emotions are just a temporary perspective, and if you act without thinking, you might make mistakes. The key is to give it time. Let the emotions settle before acting. Then, think rationally. What really happened? Ask yourself if your emotion is distorting the facts. True justice comes from a calm mind that observes before deciding, that weighs before reacting. Life doesn't punish those who feel, but those who let their emotions make the decisions for them. Emotions are temporary, but the consequences of decisions made under their influence can last forever. The Stoics knew that, while emotions are natural, they shouldn't control our choices. They saw them as visitors. They come and go. The important thing is not to let them stay longer than necessary. You are not your emotions. They come and go, but you have the power to decide what to do with them. The mistake is holding on to them and letting them define who you are. If you identify with anger or anxiety, you become a prisoner of them. But if you see them as temporary states, you regain control over your life and decisions. The ability to observe without acting is crucial. Many people react immediately to everything they feel, but the Stoic trains their mind to observe their emotions without taking impulsive actions. If anger arises, observe it without giving in to it. If sadness appears, feel it without letting it take over. If anxiety shows up, recognize it, but know it will pass. The secret is understanding that everything is temporary, and emotions, like visitors, come and go. Don't let them take over your life. Don't let them decide what you do or who you are. When a strong emotion arises, ask yourself if it's temporary or if you're feeding it. If it's something short-lived, let it pass. If you're feeding the emotion, stop. In the end, nothing can dominate you without your permission. Many people confuse being cold with lacking feelings, but what's being sought is control over emotions, not their denial. Being cold doesn't mean being empty, but being strong enough not to be carried away by your feelings. It means not becoming a slave to what you feel, but having control over what you feel. A person with emotional control can experience sadness without sinking into it, anger without destroying their relationships, and joy without becoming a prisoner to it. Life is temporary, and true wisdom lies in not making impulsive decisions based on momentary emotions. In a world that demands quick answers and immediate reactions, the wise person knows their mind is their fortress, and that not everyone needs to know what's going on inside. Silence can be more powerful than words, and acting without impulse is an act of intelligence. This is reflected in leaders and warriors who, instead of being dominated by their emotions, choose their responses with clarity and calm. The impulsive person lives at the mercy of circumstances, while the controlled person chooses how to react. They don't let empty words or passing emotions determine their life. This emotional control isn't easy to achieve. It requires self-awareness and daily practice. But those who master it live with clarity and purpose. True freedom lies in not being a slave to what you feel, but in feeling everything and deciding what's worth acting on. Those who don't control their impulses act without thinking, without considering the consequences. If they feel anger, they explode. If they feel desire, they give in. If they feel fear, they retreat. These impulses take over their actions, and they become prisoners of their emotions. But the strong person governs themselves. They feel, but they don't act impulsively. They face fear without hiding and anger without letting it control them. How many opportunities have been lost by not controlling words or impulses? The fool believes everything they feel needs to be expressed. But true strength lies in knowing when to say no to yourself. As Epictetus said, "No man is free if he is not master of himself." This means that until you learn to control your reactions, you're not in control of your life. The modern world encourages us to follow our impulses and not suppress emotions, but this has led people to make wrong decisions and face unnecessary consequences. The man who doesn't control his impulses is not reliable. He may be loyal now, but change his mind in the next moment. He lets himself be led by emotions and has no steady center. Someone without stability can't build anything lasting. True strength lies in discipline, in knowing how to feel an impulse and choose not to follow it. It's in the self-control that allows you to choose what's right, not just what's easy or pleasurable. The Stoic doesn't fool himself into thinking something won't matter, that it's just a moment. He knows that every choice, no matter how small, defines who he is. Every time he gives in, he strengthens the habit of weakness. Every time he resists, he strengthens discipline. Being disciplined isn't about living without pleasure, but knowing the right time for everything, mastering your desires, and not being controlled by them. Those who give in to impulses, speak without thinking, or spend without planning, end up destroying themselves. Those who control their actions know how to wait and hold back, experience true freedom. Society values those who have self-confidence. People admire those who stay calm when everyone around them loses their head. True power isn't in money or fame, but in the ability to say, "I am the master of my impulses." Look at your life and reflect on the times you acted on impulse and later regretted it. What will you choose? To be carried away by emotions, or to become the captain of your life, deciding who you really want to be? The weak are slaves to their impulses. The strong govern themselves. Who controls anger controls others. Anger arises quickly and destroys everything in its path, but those who control it stay firm and decide with clarity. True power lies in not losing your calm in the storm. Those who learn to control anger become unpredictable. No one knows what affects them. Modern society promotes expressing anger, but this only leads to regret. Anger solves nothing, it creates problems. Marcus Aurelius, a great emperor, said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Responding to someone's anger with more anger only puts you on the same level. If instead you stay calm, you show that you are above the situation. In an argument, if someone gets upset, anger needs fuel to continue. If you don't react, it dies out. Anger is a prison disguised as strength, because those who give in to it lose control over their actions. Does this mean swallowing everything without reacting? No. Responding is different from reacting. Responding requires control and strategy. The Stoic observes anger, and instead of being dragged by it, understands it and uses it constructively. Controlled anger turns into discipline and determination. When uncontrolled, it destroys everything. If you want to lead, you must first master yourself. The first step is not to be predictable, not allowing any provocation to steal your peace. Staying calm in the face of others' anger is an act of self-control and a silent blow that shows nothing can break you. True power belongs to those who aren't dominated by anger. Pain arrives without warning. It may come from a sudden blow or build up over time. But no matter how strong it is, pain doesn't last forever. What remains are the choices you make while you suffer. Many believe that by suffering, they can pause life, but time doesn't wait. The world keeps moving, indifferent to your pain. What will define who you are isn't what you felt, but what you did while you felt it. Remember the times you thought pain would never pass, and see how, with time, it went away. But what you did under that pain's influence is what stayed. You may have made decisions you regretted, or maybe you used that suffering to grow and become stronger. Suffering is temporary, but your actions remain. The Stoics knew that how we react to events is what defines our suffering. Epictetus taught that what matters isn't what happens, but how we deal with it. Pain is inevitable. Losing a loved one, suffering betrayal, failing at something important. However, suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but but from how we interpret it. Imagine two men who lose their jobs. The first falls into despair, feels wronged, and gets stuck in the past. Months later, he's still complaining, waiting for someone to help him. The second, though he also feels bad, doesn't let it consume him. He gets up, learns something new, and looks for new opportunities. The pain was the same, but their reactions were different. Pain is inevitable, but how we deal with it is up to us. You can let a disappointment turn you into a bitter and distrustful person, or you can use it as a lesson that makes you stronger and wiser. Those who make pain their identity are doomed to live in suffering. Saying things like, "I've always been unlucky," or "This pain destroyed me," is a mistake. It's not the pain, but how we handle it, that shapes our fate. Pain is temporary. You choose whether it will be a short-term visitor or become a permanent part of your life. When facing pain, ask yourself, what do I want to remain after this? Pain will always pass, just like every storm you've already faced. What matters are the choices you made in the midst of it. Nothing can define who you are except the decisions you make while dealing with difficulties. Emotions often deceive us. Feeling fear doesn't mean there's danger. Feeling anger doesn't mean we've been wronged. Emotions can distort reality, exaggerate risks, and create false scenarios. The wise man knows this and acts based on reason, not feelings. Emotion is impulsive, reason is strategic. When a problem arises, the emotional side wants an immediate solution, while logic calls for patience and thought. Those who give in to emotion live putting out fires, while those who use logic anticipate problems. Many wrong decisions are made in the heat of emotion. Anger can lead us to act impulsively, fear can paralyze us, and sadness can make us miss great opportunities. Later, when the emotional storm passes, regret arises, because the situation could have been handled differently. The Stoics understood this and always sought mental clarity. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are disturbed by something external, the pain does not come from the thing itself, but from your perception of it." Often, suffering is in the way we interpret the situation. What seems like a disaster may just be a temporary obstacle, and what seems like an offense may be a simple misunderstanding. Logic is powerful because it doesn't get carried away by the moment. It observes the facts clearly, weighs the consequences, and plans the next steps. While emotion gets lost in the storm, logic observes from a distance and sees the bigger picture. To cultivate this mindset, you need to create space between what you feel and how you react. When something irritates us, we don't react immediately. We wait. When something scares us, we don't retreat right away. We observe. When something saddens us, we don't give in to the pain. We analyze. This simple act of pause can prevent many mistakes. Another important practice is to question your own feelings. If you feel fear, ask, is this fear real or is it an exaggerated reaction? If you feel anger, ask, will this anger help me or will it just make things worse? If you feel anxiety, ask, is this problem real or is it just something my mind created? Questioning your feelings helps separate illusion from reality, and the truth always favors logic. While logic may often be uncomfortable, it is essential to avoid suffering caused by impulsiveness. A second of loss of control can lead to years of consequences. Look back and think about a situation where you let emotions take over and made a bad decision. If you had waited a bit, reflected before acting, would you have done things differently? If so, now you know what to do moving forward. Don't blindly trust what you feel, but trust what you think. Logic brings control. The world belongs to those who can keep their mind above their emotions. The weak are carried away by what they feel, while the strong govern themselves and choose the path wisely. Will you keep believing everything you feel, or will you start questioning your own mind? The choice is yours. Don't let your emotions control your life. Feelings can trap us like invisible chains, taking over the mind and influencing our actions. But the truth is that no emotion has the power to imprison us unless we allow it. You can feel sadness without being a sad person, feel anger without being controlled by it, or fear without becoming cowardly. The problem isn't in feeling, but in letting those emotions define who you are. Many people become prisoners of their own emotions, feeding pain and reliving negative thoughts over and over. They wait for the right moment to act, believing they'll only do something when they feel better. But time alone doesn't change anything. What really changes is what you do, even when you're not feeling well. Those controlled by emotions live reacting to what they feel. When they're excited, they act with enthusiasm, but when they're unmotivated, they do nothing. Those who live like this have no control over their lives. because everything depends on chance. True strength lies in acting regardless of what you feel. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, said, "You have power over your mind, not over external events." This means that, although we can't control what happens around us, our actions, our mind, and our destiny are under our control. Pain may come, but it's up to you to decide if it will be a temporary visitor or something permanent. The most common mistake is waiting for the right emotional moment to act. How many opportunities are lost because someone didn't feel ready? How many projects are put aside because motivation didn't show up? If you wait for the perfect moment to act, you'll never do anything, because emotions are unstable and unpredictable. It's concrete actions that shape your reality. The human mind tends to exaggerate. When you're sad, everything feels worse than it really is. When you're afraid, the future seems frightening. When you're angry, the problems feel bigger. The wise person understands that feelings aren't reality. They're just a temporary interpretation of the facts. The key to not being a prisoner of emotions is learning to observe them without identifying with them. If sadness comes, acknowledge it, but don't get lost in it. If fear arises, face it, but don't bend to it. You are bigger than any emotion. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, but rather experiencing them without being controlled by them. The difference between a wise person and a fool isn't in the number of emotions they feel, but in how they handle them. The fool surrenders to emotions, while the wise person controls them. If you look back, you'll see how many times you acted impulsively and regretted it, or failed to act because you were paralyzed by an emotion that later lost its importance. Emotions are temporary, but the consequences of actions stay. Life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. The world doesn't change to match your emotional state. Reality goes on, no matter how you feel. So the question is, will you keep letting your emotions decide your fate, or will you start acting with more control and wisdom? The key to freedom is not being a slave to your own feelings. This requires practice, effort, and vigilance, but those who master this art become unbreakable. They feel everything, but choose what to do with it. They don't let emotions take over, but use reason to guide their actions. Many people associate coldness with a lack of feelings, but that's not the case. True strength is in staying calm amidst chaos. Someone who doesn't get shaken by offenses or problems, who stays composed and doesn't react impulsively, may seem cold, but this is the mark of a strong mind. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean ignoring them, but choosing how to respond to them. Society teaches us that we should feel everything intensely, but is that really a virtue? Those who react to every impulse, every provocation, living on the edge, are always responding without control. Their peace depends on what happens around them. But those who know how to manage their emotions and don't let them control them carry an inner peace that nothing can break. Coldness in reality is awareness, knowing you feel, but deciding how to act with it. Instead of being dragged along by emotions, you can be the leader of your mind. You know that anger can be useful if directed well, but destructive if out of control. You know that sadness can teach, but shouldn't become permanent. Fear can be a warning, but shouldn't freeze you. You have the power to decide how to react. That choice is yours. Always remember, you have the power to decide how to react. Don't let emotions dictate the course of your life. If this message resonated with you, comment below using the phrase, "I have the power to decide how to react," and share it with others who might benefit from this reflection. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Together, we can learn to master our emotions and live with more control and wisdom.